In the late 70s, I recall visiting our grandparents' house. They lived in a holler about a 20-minute drive away from the nearest town. When going to their house, you would turn off a main road onto a rocky road. I always knew when the turn was coming because there was a little mom-and-pop type store right on the side of the road. This store was really the sort of thing you would never see nowadays. It was a very small, old gray building. There was a very old drink cooler sitting out on the porch, and it was very small inside. There was a counter, some coolers, some shelves with some simple groceries on them. It was truly the definition of what a small country store was. By the counter, they also had boxes of candy that cost about 10 cents, if I remember correctly. My cousins and I used to always walk down to the store and buy boxes of candy whenever we had a dime or two on us. That was what was going on this day. I was 10 years old at the time. My cousin was the same age as me, basically. We decided to walk down the road to the store, get some pop, and get some candy as well. Now, it was a little bit of a walk. It took us quite a while to get there, but it wasn't something we hadn't done before. This time, though, something very different happened. A car pulled up the street with an older guy in the driver's seat. He stopped right by us and asked us what we were doing. We had never seen the guy around before, and we knew most of the people in this area. We simply told him we were going to the store to grab some candy. The guy insisted we let him drive us there. My cousin and I enjoyed the walk though, and we knew that we didn't get in the car with people we didn't know. We turned him down immediately, but he kept trying to get us to follow him for a while. Finally giving up, the man who was downright creepy then drove off. Now, the little store didn't really have a parking lot. It was more like you would just park out front at any time you wanted. We got close and saw the guy from the car was not only parked right there, he was sitting on the porch swing drinking a tall bottle of Mellow Yellow. When we arrived at the store, he tried to talk to us again, letting us know he would be happy to drive us home once we were done. Needless to say, my cousin and I were extremely uncomfortable. The guy was so persistent. As we walked into the store, the man called out behind us, "I'll be waiting for you." We told the shop owner what was going on. I can't recall her name, but she was immediately concerned. She called our parents, and my dad drove down to the store to pick us up. Apparently, when my dad showed up, the man immediately jumped into his car and left. We found out when we got older that this man had been accused several times of doing things to boys that lived in the area. I really believe it, based off the way he was behaving. I don't know what would have happened if we got into the car, or if we tried to walk home without calling my dad, but I do know it would not have been good. I never really got scared of very much. I would often do things that probably might scare other people without really thinking about it. One thing I always did, and even do nowadays, is take walks at nighttime. I'm a night person, like I'm sure many people are, and my mind just works better when it's dark outside. I started taking walks in the dark, a lot of times really late at night, when I was really young. This happened when I was around 14 years old. Me and my family lived in an old house, way out in the country on a hillside. Although the house itself was really nice, it did not have air conditioning. So in the summertime, all we had to keep ourselves cool were fans and open windows. Today, I much prefer cold weather, and I live in a cooler climate because of that. Back then and today, if it's too warm, I won't have any chance of getting to sleep. I shared a bedroom with my brother when we lived in this house. We had the windows open and had one box fan. On this summer night, I was very uncomfortable and I could not go to sleep. I got up and tried to watch some television. I always liked the shows that came on late at night, such as Freddy's Nightmares or Tales from the Dark Side. Even watching those was not enough to make me forget about just how hot it was inside. I checked and it was a much cooler temperature outside than it was inside, so I decided I would go out and go for a walk. It had to be around midnight when I went out. Everyone else was in bed, and I didn't tell anyone where I was going. It wasn't that big a deal though. There was nothing around our house but hills and trees, some gravel roads and the like. It wasn't like there was anyone around to mug me or something like that. I was just hoping a walk in the cooler air would tire me out enough to be able to sleep when I got home. I walked on the side of the gravel road. There wasn't a shoulder per se, but there was some normal ground on both sides of the road. While walking on the gravel, even in shoes, it could be very uncomfortable, so I walked on the side and enjoyed it. I went pretty far down, but no further than I had ever gone before. I eventually decided to turn around and head back toward the house. Right as I turned around, the most interesting thing happened. A small black cat came running down the road that I hadn't turned down and ran right up to me. I always liked cats, although we didn't have one, so I stopped to pet this kitty. The cat was very receptive, and I almost didn't want to stop playing with them, but I knew I had to get home before I was out there for too long. As I began walking away, the cat decided it wasn't ready to give up on me. Instead, she began walking alongside me. The cat kept up with me as I walked, its little legs working fast so it wouldn't fall behind. Honestly, it was very cute. As we know with cats, they can pretty much decide who they want to be with, and I sort of had a feeling this cat was going to be following me for a while. As we walked along, something began to distract the cat. She stopped, and because I was paying close attention to her, I stopped and tried to see what she was looking at. Something obviously seemed to be annoying her. She was hissing at some unseen thing in the woods. It made me a little nervous, thinking something bad might be out there, but I couldn't see or hear anything myself. After a few moments, I was able to convince the cat to go ahead and start walking with me again. I began to wonder, though, what could have possibly annoyed this little cat so much. I also thought that whatever it was, it must have made my imagination begin to run away with me. I actually began thinking I was hearing someone or something walking around in the woods to the side of me. The longer I walked, the more I thought I was hearing these things. I did begin to feel a little bit scared for the first time, but the presence of that cat walking beside me made me feel much better. The next time I heard something, though, it definitely sounded like there really was something out in the woods following me. The cat noticed it too. She immediately took a stance very similar to the one she had before and began growling and hissing at something. It was exactly the way she had been acting before. I was convinced that whatever she was hissing at, it was definitely following us. I didn't know what it could have been, a human or an animal, but I knew I needed to get home as quickly as possible. I would have picked the cat up and ran with her, but I didn't want to startle or scare her. I tried to hurry as much as possible without leaving the cat behind. I could tell she wasn't fully grown yet, so she was really struggling to keep up. Honestly, I was almost considering this cat mine now. The rest of the walk home was very unnerving. I kept hearing things out in the woods, but decided that if none of it was bothering the cat enough to stop, I was probably okay. I just hurried along and tried my best to ignore everything I was hearing. I was happy when I almost arrived back to my home. It had a really big yard and driveway, so even though I was in the backyard, it was still a little bit of a walk in the dark to get there. I half expected the cat to leave me, because she'd successfully escorted me home. She didn't though. She followed me right up to the house. I decided to reward this little kitty for her escort mission. I couldn't bring her in the house right away though, since none of my family knew about her, and would be shocked there was this random cat in our house. If they noticed her while I was sleeping, who knew what they would do? I was sure she would wait for me as I went inside though. I got a bit of lunch meat and a bowl of water, and went back outside. The cat was still there like I'd thought, but she was very agitated now. She was looking off to the side of the house toward the fence that separated our yard from the woods. When I looked over there, at first I couldn't see anything, but as I looked a little bit longer, I detected some movement out by the fence. There was someone or something out there in the darkness, and it was clearly distressing this poor little cat quite a lot. It was when I saw a rush of movement and a figure trying to climb over the fence that I realized this was a person, and I figured it must be a person who was up to something bad. I had a rifle I kept in the garage, so I ran to grab it. I hoped the guy, whoever he was, would see that gun and get scared and run off. I didn't really want to fire it. By the time I got back with it, the guy was much closer. I could see him a lot better. He was really ratty looking, almost like he was homeless or something. He saw me with gun in hand and paused. It was then that I noticed he had a large hunting knife in his hand, and a chill went down my spine. "Get off our property," I warned him. The man took a step toward me, as if he was daring me to fire. I didn't do anything until he stepped even closer. I fired the gun at him. I didn't hit him, but it acted as a warning shot. A warning shot I hoped he would take very seriously. The guy turned around and ran back to the fence. He jumped over it and disappeared into the night. The rifle shot, of course, woke my dad and family up. My dad came out onto the porch, and I had to explain to him what just happened. He took the rifle and told me to take the cat inside. He went to check out the sides of the fence to make sure the guy was really gone. We didn't figure out who the guy was, or why he was carrying a knife around in the dark like he did. My dad thought that with the cat's reaction, maybe he was abusing it or something. There were some pretty sick people out there who did that sort of stuff to animals. Maybe the cat had gotten away from him. Maybe he just wanted to attack me, but we didn't think we'd have a problem with him from then on, since he knew now we had guns in the house. We adopted the cat and called her Midnight. She was the best pet I ever had. I kept her indoors though, just in case that guy ever tried to come back for her. I think she could have taken care of herself though. Hi, I'm 22 and female. I'm from Hawaii and live on the more countryside of my island, where not even Google Maps can tell you exactly where I live. To put it very simply, I live out in the boonies, and people who don't live by me don't ever come into this neighborhood unless they're extremely lost. I'm only saying that for context. About 3 days ago, I was in my driveway, on my way to catch the bus to work. That was until this strange catering truck came driving directly toward my house and pulled right into my driveway. A middle-aged man came out, wearing a tacky aloha shirt only tourists would be seen wearing, and dirty khaki shorts and run-down sandals. He looked dirty to say the least, looked like he hadn't scrubbed down in days. He asked me if I wanted to buy meat or seafood. I said no thanks. He then asked if anyone else was home. I lied and said my uncle was, hoping he would go away. These kinds of trucks don't come anywhere near my side of the island, by the way. He refused to leave. He started complimenting my looks, saying how I had nice hair, then going on about how beautiful island girls are, our curves, and other creepy stuff like that. When my neighbor stepped outside to see what was going on, he ran back to his truck and drove away. Yet once I turned the corner to catch my bus, there he was. He then slowly drove behind me. I felt sketched out and called my mom, who's a dispatcher. I told her what happened and how he looked, and she told me she'd handle it. By that time, more people started coming out of their homes, so he decided to just leave. 2 hours later, I was at work when she told me she got a couple of other calls about that same guy, exact same description as me. I was asked to go down to the station to see if I recognized anyone. I pointed out his picture in a lineup. They confirmed that this man was a well-known sex trafficker that they hadn't been able to get a hold of for weeks now. Since then, I locked my house as soon as my mom left for work, and I haven't slept well since. I've been throwing up and having panic attacks every time I leave time for myself to think. I'm scared of this guy, and I don't know what to do. He knows where I work, my house, my face. It scares me to the point I've even covered up my windows, just in case someone might be trying to look inside. A couple of years back, my best friend and I went on a road trip to the States for a music festival. We met up with some friends and saw a lot of things and whatnot. One of our friends came back home with us. He needed to get back home for school, and his buddies didn't want to head back just yet. We decided to drive straight home, and did it in shifts. It took about 24 hours for the full drive. My story starts when I was driving the night shift at about 2 a.m. or so. It was a beautifully clear night, full moon, no clouds, middle of summer. While observing all these conditions, I also noticed that our GPS had turned us down a back road, and we'd driven into a very large valley. There were open fields on every side, and not another car or house in sight. It's important to note that we had not seen anyone or anything even relating to human presence for a few hours. Upon entering this valley, we lost our satellite signal as well. Now we had no satellite radio, no GPS, and no cell signal. I figured that it didn't really matter. I knew that if we followed this road for a couple more hours, we'd eventually get out. About 20 minutes after entering this valley, and after having lost all our connections, we came upon a bridge. As we got closer, I saw a car pulled onto the side of the road. Not uncommon, I guess. People have to sleep, and they pull off to the side of the road when they really need to. What is uncommon is that this car had all of its windows completely blacked out. With all the light from the moon, we should have been able to see at least partially inside, but it was pitch black. Getting closer, we also realized there was no license plate. No big deal, we assumed it must have been an abandoned vehicle. That is, until we passed by, and the vehicle almost immediately turned its lights on and pulled out behind us onto the road. Now it started to get real creepy. The vehicle started tailgating us. Out here in the middle of nowhere, with us unable to see who was inside, we started to freak out a bit. Okay, maybe he's lost and needs to follow someone out of the area, but that didn't explain the windows being blacked out, or the lack of a license plate. With this car now following us, I started to have very uneasy feelings. Soon, I began to full-blown panic. I wanted to get away from this vehicle ASAP. I tried to push these feelings aside, as it seemed like a silly response to a possibly explainable situation. That is, until I observed something in the middle of the road. Coming closer, I could see what looked to be a body laying in the middle of the lanes. It was not a very big road, and like I said, it was also a back road. At this moment, and at the sight of what appeared to be a body in the road ahead, we really didn't know what to do. There was no way I was stopping for any reason, obviously, in this desolate and isolated area. There was no one to help us, and there were no vehicles around, other than the one now following us. There was no housing or lights as far as the eye could see. No cell service, no satellite, nothing. By the time we came upon the body, there was no room to go around. There were no shoulders on the road, and deep ditches on either side. We were close enough now to see that it was not a body at all. It was a scarecrow. I drove right over it and continued on. The car continued to follow us. I sped up and it sped up. I slowed down and it slowed down too. I decided to fully punch the gas. After about 2 minutes of this, the car eventually slowed down, did a U-turn, and then drove back in the opposite direction. My passenger then turned to me. I swear I saw spikes on that scarecrow earlier. Luckily for us, we were driving a very big truck, and the wheel span was bigger than the scarecrow on the road. We didn't really have to touch it much while driving over. It was another half hour before we reached cell services, and the satellite picked back up. It wasn't until we reached home at 5 a.m. that we remembered during this time there had been a couple of people missing, reported in our province. Ones who were on vacation and driving home, who never made it back and were never found. Me and my passengers fully believe we escaped some crazy Wolf Creek type of situation. We contacted the police about it and ended up making a full police report. However, we were unable to pinpoint the exact location. There wasn't anything they could really do other than file the report. We definitely didn't want this to happen to anyone else, as it was spooky as hell. Strap in, this is a decently long one. I'm a 23-year-old woman, and this story is about a 33-year-old man. Let's call him Greg. I met him at the gym about a year back or so. I used to go to the gym with my mother, and being an introvert, I very seldom used to engage with or even talk to people. Being in the gym since the last 2 years, I had seen Greg work out and never really caught him staring or even looking in my direction. He was a well-educated, well-spoken man, and I assumed that interacting with him would not pose any threat to me. One day, Greg just randomly walked up to me at the gym and asked to add me on Facebook so he could promote some things regarding his business. I didn't really think much of it, as I'm barely active on the platform anyway. I let him add me. Slowly, our interactions grew in the gym, as well as on social media. I was going through a rough patch, so I would often find myself looking for a friend or perhaps even more. From the very beginning, my mother did not seem to like Greg. She felt that something was off about him. Regardless, I chose to meet him and another mutual friend of ours from the gym for coffee. I wasn't romantically inclined towards Greg, but I wasn't totally opposed to it either. At coffee, our conversations were quite general. But on text, Greg would casually flirt with me a lot. I would just ignore it, but that turned out to be a big mistake. The more I spoke to Greg and the more I found out about him, the more I realized I didn't see any kind of future with him in it, not even as a friend. Eventually, I started backing off and took longer and longer to reply to his messages. I didn't want to blatantly confront him. After all, we did go to the same gym, and I wanted to avoid any hostility. Greg also slowly backed off as well, and we stopped talking altogether. Fast forward 6 months. I got my dream job and posted about it on Facebook. Greg congratulated me and told me he was proud of me. I gave him the benefit of the doubt and started replying to his texts again. He immediately began making flirtatious remarks toward me, but this time I told him flat out that made me uncomfortable, and I didn't want to be involved with him romantically or sexually. Subsequently, the conversations died down, and we parted on what I thought were cordial terms. He would often send me messages asking for feedback on some of his work, but I would generally ignore them. Now, in July of this year, Greg messaged me once more, asking for some feedback. He also sent another message asking whether I would like to withdraw from his broadcast list. I respectfully told him I would like to withdraw, since I didn't think I was qualified enough to give him appropriate feedback anyway. He went completely off on me, sending a bunch of messages, most of which I did not understand. I asked for context and he told me I was only getting that over a call. I agreed. Another mistake. We spoke for 2 hours, wherein I made it very clear that he was only a friend and nothing more. He agreed and was very respectful throughout. Because of that, I assumed there was no harm in simply talking to him. For a couple of weeks, we spoke as friends before he started proposing me being a future work partner for a music venture. I was hesitant and would shoot his invitations to meet down by making various excuses. After about 3 weeks of this, he began making sexual remarks toward me. It made me uncomfortable, and I told him that I didn't want to talk to him anymore since we weren't on the same page. He started to get angry. He told me that if I wouldn't meet him, he didn't want to talk to me anymore either. I thought to myself, good riddance. I was getting increasingly tired of him calling me throughout the day and talking always about his inflated self-image. He told me something like he'd contact me after a year and we could meet then if I reconsidered my feelings toward him. I was growing impatient. I just wanted him out of my life. I was off my phone the next day for 6 to 7 hours. When I came back, I was welcomed to numerous missed calls and messages, most of which were threatening in nature. He threatened to show up to my house and kill me and my family. This is when I realized I may need to involve my family and the police. I told my parents everything. They didn't immediately contact the police though. These could just be empty threats from a man who wouldn't take no for an answer. The following day, Greg got my parents' numbers and started sending them threatening messages, claiming he would abduct me if they didn't make me marry him. We contacted the police. They went straight to Greg's home to investigate. But seeing his behavior, out on the roof half naked, screaming at the sky, they declared him mentally unfit and told us he could not be arrested. We withdrew the complaint and contacted higher law authorities. Whilst we were awaiting a response, Greg allegedly committed a crime in a 5-star hotel. He attacked a female employee and a guest with a knife and tried to rape the employee. Consequently, an FIR was filed, which led to Greg being admitted to a mental institution. He stayed there for a couple of days and now walks completely free. We were able to file another complaint against him, which was taken more seriously this time. However, we were advised not to create a case, as he would easily get off on bail. So he still roams free and still continues to contact me from unknown numbers every once in a while, making me feel like I'm under constant threat whenever I'm outside my house. When I was in the 3rd grade, I remember answering the house phone to find my grandpa on the other line. We started chatting like we usually did, and then he asked me if he could walk me to school tomorrow. My grandpa lived in Florida, and we lived in New Jersey. What? Grandpa, you're all the way in Florida? He kept insisting he would be there to walk me to school tomorrow. After we said love you to one another, the man hung up. My mom came in confused and asked me who I was talking to. I excitedly told my parents that Grandpa was coming over tomorrow. They were very confused and asked me where I'd even gotten that idea from. I told them that Grandpa had just called and told me. They called up my actual grandfather and asked if he had called and spoke to me. He said no. I'll never forget the fright on their faces in that moment. We kept an eye out the next day, but no mysterious person seemed to come and try and abduct me or something. I was too scared to ever walk alone to school after that, though. What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here. I know it's been quite a while since I did an outro. If you guys like this video, please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you feel so inclined. If you have any feedback about the video itself, please be sure to leave it in the comments below. I always do read the comments, although with me recording every day, I don't have as much time to respond to them anymore. If you guys have a story you would like to send in yourselves, please be sure to look in the description below the video. There will be links to my Facebook, Twitter, and Gmail accounts. You can go ahead and send me a message on any of those, and I'll try to get to your story as soon as possible. If you do decide to send in a story, please be sure to include in the tagline what the name of the story is, the type of story if it has one, and how you'd like to be credited in the description of the video the story appears in. Also, please be sure to include as much detail as you feel comfortable with, and as much correct grammar as possible, to ensure the best chances of your story appearing in a video. I think that's about it for this video here. Let me know if you guys have any thoughts about the channel or anything, and thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys have a great day.